Hi, this is Sean Morash, and you're listening to Mike Delivers with Mike Biseglia. I first met Mikey B sitting next to him at a Brooklyn Nets game. I knew he was good people because who else would grub free tickets from the company like me? And if you could sit through the pain of watching the Brooklyn Nets, you could surely sit through the pain of listening to him host a podcast. Look, he looks like Seinfeld, eats like Newman. Wouldn't trust him watching my kid, but I damn well would trust him delivering a double meat BMT before it got too soggy from that oil and vinegar.
Welcome inside Mike Delivers from his wife's 2017 Toyota RAV4. Here's your host, Mike Biseglia.
That's right, this is Mike Delivers, episode number 111. And I'm your host, Mike Biseglia. And I'm coming to you from my wife's 2017 Toyota RAV4. I'm currently outside of the Buffalo Wild Wings in Secaucus, New Jersey. Gorgeous spot. I've done 1,335 deliveries, and I have not stolen food from anybody. I also have a 99% driver satisfaction rating, which if you ask me, it's pretty damn good. You can find this pod where all major podcasts are found, including Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, our friends, Apple Podcasts. Go ahead, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment as well. Shout out to the O'Brien Creative Group. They made my awesome looking logo, the Mike Delivers logo. If you want more information on the O'Brien Creative Group, need help with some logos of your own, some brand identity, or even website design, head on over to the o'briencreativegroup.com. More information on them, you can find that in my show notes. My Patreon page, I've talked about it, and I will continue to talk about it because I love it. I love doing it, most importantly. My wife and I have really we've created our own little niche. It's our Patreon pages. We do bonus content. My wife blindfolds me with her pantyhose, and she puts food in my mouth, and I have to taste it and test it. We do extra podcasts, and those podcasts are also on video. Basically, it's an extension of the Mike Delivers podcast, where we do some other fun food deliveries, fun food reviews. We're not doing any deliveries. I do the deliveries as a driver. I do a podcast about it. Point is, it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. It's $4 a month if you want to sign up for the Mike Delivers podcast Patreon page. And also, still on there, way back when, the original Patreon post, if you want to find out why I now say I'm coming to you from my wife's 2017 Toyota RAV4, you can hear the story of how I crashed my wife's 2007 Toyota RAV4. It's weird now because you say 2017 so many times. Saying 07 sounds weird. Just like it sounds weird saying basketball drives. This used to be called basketball drives, which now just sounds even more bizarre to say out loud. Interview coming up in a matter of moments. It's with a Twitter account. The man behind it, the Twitter account, Dolan J. Trump. Yes, it is combining James Dolan, the owner of the Knicks, with Donald Trump, the president of America. And it is a parody account that kind of morphs the two of them together. He is an hysterical follow. I highly recommend checking him out. Dolan J. Trump on Twitter. He is a funny guy, and we go behind the scenes. He's going to do stories from the road with me today. So he wasn't in the car with me, but he's going to do some of the stories. He'll bounce off the different things that I say, and we'll get his reaction to it. And then also, which is funny, he's got a great story from when he was a driver. You'll hear that one as well. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's at Dolan_J_Trump. That information, again, will also be in the Mike Delivers show notes. So we'll get that interview in a moment. I want to start off this episode, though, by talking about just in general doing deliveries in the area that I used to call home when I was growing up. So I live now in Essex County, New Jersey, and typically that's where I do all my deliveries. But sometimes, the Uber Eats app takes you to different places. And it just so happened that I ended up in a town called Fort Lee, New Jersey, which is in Bergen County. But what made these deliveries so weird was I ended up delivering to an apartment complex that my parents lived at for a couple of years when I was in college. So it was really strange to deliver to a place that my parents called home for a couple of years. Now, this was a spot that I was just really more in and out of because I was in college. So I wouldn't say it was like my official home or anything like that. But it was a strange feeling going back to this area, just seeing like all the restaurants were different, all the businesses were different, and then just going into this apartment complex kind of freaked me out a little bit. It freaked me out because I remember being in there, and it was when I was at Syracuse University in college, and at the time, it's like you feel like you have the whole world in front of you. You have all this opportunity, especially as a broadcaster. I was like, I'm going to do all this incredible work as a broadcaster. I'm going to be on SportsCenter. I'm going to be on ESPN. Even though in reality, when I look back on it, I have no interest at all in doing any of that shit. It gives me horrible anxiety to think of not in being in front of a camera. That doesn't bother me. But writing scripts, that bothers me. Like, all right, let's go now check out the Giants versus the Bears game. Started off, look at this awful injury. I don't know what to type. So that wasn't really my thing. But the point is, I remember being in that building and thinking about everything that was in front of me. And then it was just kind of weird that, let's say, 15-ish years later, I'm back in this same building, but I'm dropping off Vietnamese food to a family that lives there. And here I am. I don't think in my wildest dreams I would have thought to myself in 2005 that I would be doing food delivery, and not only doing it, but loving it and wanting to make it my full-time gimmick in things and making it a more lucrative career. And why I say full-time, like with the podcast, and make this become something really special. So it was just kind of odd, and it just hit me like, man, all those years later, here I am, and like, it's okay. This is cool. Like, this is going in the right direction. Like, at first, I'll be honest, I kind of was like, man, I didn't quite live up to my own expectations. I didn't live up to what I thought I could be. And I think it crept in my head because I was in this place where I felt like all these options were available to me. And I felt bad about myself a little bit. And then I just kind of worked out of it and realized everything is okay. I'm doing something I love. I'm doing something I really, truly enjoy. And that's what matters. And I've talked about this on other episodes. Like, I get really wrapped up and warped in this time frame zone where I just get so caught up. And where was I in this year? Where was I in that year? So this, like, was a way to spiral me into that place, because how could you not? Going back into an apartment complex you lived at for a couple of summers or whatever when you were at Syracuse University, I mean, it really just brought me back. And then it got me thinking, like, 15 years later, have I done enough with what I said I would? And I can't put a time frame on that. That's what I started thinking. Like, you can't be upset at yourself. You got a long way to go. This is early in your journey of whatever. So, I know I'm gonna get into the deliveries. I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But you just think back, man. Like, how can you? It's like, I could only imagine it's like somebody that goes back to their childhood home that hadn't been there in 35 years, and you just start thinking and thinking and thinking. And I left this apartment complex, and I'm thinking about when I went into the city and how I got over there through the George Washington Bridge, or there's different restaurants I went to, or I walked here, and it brings you back to a place in your life. And that's what that did. So Uber Eats time machine, because it brought me back to an apartment in Fort Lee, New Jersey, which was just very strange. But I'm glad I did it. It was just too cool to see the area and the restaurants. And now I remember, like, all the different places I would go eat and see, and all the different buildings that had been built, and the complexes and the change. It was kind of cool, and I like delivering in Bergen County. I think I'm going to do a little bit more of that. I think that's a good way to make some money. So I'm going to be experimenting with that gimmick that is the Bergen County food delivery scene. All right, interview time. Dolan _J Trump. He's got a fantastic parody account online on Twitter. Follow him, watch him, listen to him. He is tremendous, and he's a lot of fun to follow as he pokes fun at both Donald Trump and James Dolan in this combined Twitter account. I think people will find it extremely fascinating. But Dolan _J Trump, he joins me on the Mike Delivers podcast, and we talk about my stories from the road. We also will hear one of his stories from the road when he was a driver himself, which I think people will find fascinating and entertaining. Here's my conversation, stories from the road style, with Dolan J. Trump. All right, stories from the road time here on the Mike Delivers podcast, and I'm very excited to have this special guest join me and listen to my stories from the road, react to my stories from the road. He is a ultra celebrity on Twitter. He is extremely entertaining, and that is Dolan J. Trump. Mr. Dolan J. Trump, thank you for coming on the Mike Delivers podcast.
Mike, it's a pleasure as always to be on. This is actually my first appearance on the Mike Delivers pod. I've been on your other show, a couple times, including last week, which many people now are wondering, will I replace you as a host?
And the answer should be absolutely yes. I'm okay with it. I think it would be good for ratings. Obviously, everything you've been touching turns to gold, so I'm game with it if you want to do it.
The Midas touch.
The Midas touch, man. I'm into it. So I'm excited to have you on here on the pod and react to some of my stories from the road. So let me kick it off with this bad boy. I pick up from this one sushi restaurant that's in West Orange, New Jersey. Not many sushi places on the Uber Eats app, and I think that's because most of them have their own local delivery drivers that they use. So it's rare to find some of these sushi joints that are on an app, which means that you typically go far distances to pick up sushi when delivering or picking up for Uber Eats. So this one spot in West Orange, always excited to get it because I know that it's sushi usually means a higher amount of money spent, which means good things for me and my tip. So I get the ding. I know I'm going to the restaurant. It says on the Uber Eats app that I'll be dropping this food off in Bloomfield, which is the area where I live. So I'm like, great, even better. So I pick up the food, get it in my car, start the app, and I'm like, this looks really familiar. Turns out I'm delivering this food to my neighbor's house that are 2 doors down from where I live. So I drive on home. I'm literally going back to where my house is. I'm in a community complex. I drop off the food at my neighbor's house, leave it there. These are people that just moved into the neighborhood. I thought about maybe should I leave them a note? Should I tell them who their delivery driver is? But I just left the food and bailed. Do you think maybe I should have communicated with them, told them that, their neighbor across the street is a Uber Eats driver? Or do you think I made the right choice just bailing, leaving the food and getting out of there and then turning around and leaving my own home complex?
I think you made the right move. I don't know. I think it would have been a little awkward being like, hey, almost like stalker-esque. Hey, I just picked up your food. By the way, I live right there across the parking lot of this complex. So I think you made the right move. It just, how hard was it, though, to get back at that point when you were home to then get back out and leave? Were you already on the road for a while, or was that
Yeah, that's a good question. And I had debated, at that point, I'm like, should I just go home and pee? Because the issue now with COVID-19 in restaurants is you're not allowed to use bathrooms really anymore. Some spots have opened it up a little bit, but they barricade bathrooms. So at this point, I'm like, I should just go home, pee, get back on the road. I did not. I actually went to get one more order and left. But what's been so creepy now is I see these people all the time walking around the neighborhood because they have a baby. And I just want to be like, how was your sushi? How was your meal? But I haven't had the balls to do it.
You can't do that. It's an instant conversation starter. The fact that they have a baby, you guys have a baby.
Yeah.
These can be, that's who you become friends with. It's funny, when my wife and I first got married, 1 year anniversary, we got a dog. And then, that's when we were first living in Hoboken. And then we became friends with all the people in our building and neighboring buildings who have dogs. And then you see, when you have kids, then you become friends with people who have kids around the same age and so on. So it would just be it's a funny story. It just, at first it'd be like, who is this guy? That's a little creepy, but I don't know. You seem like a good guy where you don't give off that creepy vibe. So I think you're good. The whole peeing thing, I would have done the pee. I'll tell you, you want to hear a funny story from I never told this story to a mass audience. And I was actually a Lyft driver a couple of years ago, just for a summer gig. Did it for 1 week. So this is obviously pre-pandemic. And see, I don't know the difference. I assume with Uber Eats, I don't know. The way I describe it is when you're when you're a Lyft driver, it's like you're being cast out to sea, and you keep getting further and further away from home. So I live in Hudson County. I'm living in West New York, New Jersey. So all right, so and so needs to get picked up in Jersey City, and then next thing I'm dropping them off. Hoboken. Then I'm dropping them off in Jersey City. Then I'm picking someone up in Jersey City. And then I got to drive them to Hackensack, and I'm like, all right, maybe I'll go home now. Maybe one more ride. So then I pick up someone in Hackensack, and then they're going to Patterson. I'm getting further and further away from home.
Right.
But this is actually the crazy. I know this is your show, and you're telling
it's fine. Take it.
So my first time driving, the first pickup I had was a pregnant woman who was basically wanted me to drive her to the hospital. And I'm like, this lady, and this was on a 3:00 in the afternoon, 3:30 in the afternoon on a Friday in downtown Jersey City, and there's traffic. It was summertime. I'm like, this lady's gonna basically go into labor in the backseat of my car right now. It's so it was crazy. So that was one of my first pickups. But then another time was, and this, I mean, I've heard your story in the past where you say you pee like all the time when you're on the road, drinking all that coffee and everything.
Yeah.
So I have a huge iced coffee. I do a couple of rides. I pick up this guy in Jersey City Heights, and and then they don't tell you where the destination is. So I see that once they pick the guy up, it says destination like 55th Street and like 7th Avenue, and it says like and this is rush hour in the morning. And then I'm like for like I don't know how long I'm telling this guy. I'm like, hey, would you like to go to the ferry instead? Like you can get, it's going to take us over an hour. If I take you to the ferry, you'll be, across the Hudson River in 8 minutes. And the guy's like, yeah, I'm not from around here, so I'll just do the ride. And I had to go to the bathroom at the time. So I dropped the guy off, eventually got into the city, dropped the guy off. And I mean, I'm sure you know what Midtown rush hour looks like. I'm basically sandwiched in between all these trucks and cars. Like this is where like you're at an intersection and the lights turning green, maybe like your car gets to move up an inch or two and then it goes red again. And there's absolutely nowhere to pull over or park your car for a second. You just run into a store. So the way I describe it is I had my Dumb and Dumber moment. I had to basically spill out my iced coffee and I had to do my business in the front seat of my car. It was terrible. I was actually at the time thinking about doing a podcast, and that the name of that episode was going to be called like Uplifted. And that was going to be my story from being a Lyft driver. And from that, I learned, first of all, my rating probably plummeted after that, but anytime I ever picked up someone and it said, you're picking up so-and-so in Weehawken or Edgewater, and it's a destination like New York City, I'm like, I cancel them. I don't want it. So
I love it.
That was the end of my driving.
I love it. I have not peed in a bottle anywhere. And to answer your first part of the question, Uber Eats, it's a little bit, you do end up going, tailing in different areas and going further and further away. But because I think this is centered around restaurants, sometimes it's like the current, it pulls you back to where you want to go a little bit more, which is a little bit different. But, just like anything else, though, with the app, you can follow, you can go out anywhere. But yeah, man, like that's why but for my luxury is I would go in restaurants. So I'd be like, I'm going to go pick up this order at McDonald's before I go in, like before I put ask for the order, let me just use their bathroom at different restaurants. So I had that luxury. You don't have that as a Lyft or, a regular Uber driver.
Right. Yeah. That iced coffee was a bad decision, but the cup didn't come in handy. It was scary. It was like on the verge of panic. It was like an hour into it. I'm like, I can't hold this anymore.
First time this has ever happened to me, which was surprising, but I dropped off a food order at somebody's house, this nice neighborhood, big streets, easy to get in and out. This is the kind of stuff I like, where it's not like apartments back to back to back, no cars behind me, simple time. So I was a little bit more relaxed. So I'm dropping off the food for this said person, and it just at the same time, it just so happens that somebody's dropping off an edible arrangements order to these same people. So I was feeling good. I was feeling happy. I was feeling a little cocky about myself. And I was like, you know what? Let me strike up a conversation with the edible arrangements driver just to be like, you know what? We're drivers. We're in this together. Like I want to be boys with this guy. So I strike up a conversation with him like, hey, how's it going? How's everything on the road? Didn't say anything back to me, ignored me, walked away, and just was like, I had wanted nothing to do with me. He definitely saw me. He definitely heard me. Did not give two shits for me. Do you think, I personally was like, we needed a bond here. I was surprised that he wanted nothing to do with me. I thought we would strike up a conversation and become delivery driver buddies. Didn't happen. I was disappointed.
Should you be disappointed for that?
I don't know. I just feel like if you're a delivery driver and he's a delivery driver, like we should be friends.
Right,
like I thought that was bullshit.
You should have that. I agree, that common bond. But you're in the same. You're doing the same exact gig. So I don't know why he had that that attitude in that situation.
Yeah, it seemed like garbage. Like maybe the edible arrangements people think they're better than Uber Eats drivers. I mean, could that be it? Did he look down on it?
It sounds like a Seinfeld episode right now.
It totally does.
Right.
Why didn't the driver help me out? I don't know. I was in the mood to make a friendship there, and it didn't happen. I was very disappointed. All right, I always love to get stories from the road from some of my friends, some of my colleagues on the road. This one is from Gerald. He shared this with me. Let's take a listen and hear Gerald's story from the road. Gerald's in the New Orleans area.
Hey, Mike. So I was making a delivery in an apartment complex, and they had construction redoing the roads in there, and everything was just so tight. It's just so frustrating. I couldn't find the apartment. The building was in the area that was having construction that was blocked off, so I got so frustrated. I ended up just parking and walking. I finally found it. So I get back to my vehicle, and there's pretty much one way in, one way out. Well, they have a van blocking my way out. I was already frustrated. I honk my horn. They have people standing outside. Put my head out the window. I'll holler at them if they could move the van. See, I felt like I'm living in New York or something. Well, the guy comes up to me and tells me it's a coroner's van. They're taking a dead body out of one of the apartments. God, I felt so awkward. I told him, okay, well, I'll just park and wait.
All right, so we just heard from Gerald, his story from the road. I've never personally had to deal with anything like that. I understand always being in a rush and being in the mood to move and go, but seeing a dead body while doing an Uber Eats delivery would freak me out a little bit. I have to say that would be kind of odd.
What was the craziest thing? I mean, yes, I agree. The dead body is something you expect to see. But what about for you, for all your crazy stories? Like I told you before with the woman who was pregnant in my car and whatnot. What about for you?
The craziest story I had happened on the road. It wasn't as if it was like this crazy thing that was a bizarro world, but it was a full circle one. And it was one of my favorite episodes when I talk about the picking up the cookie. And it was when I picked up 5 large cookies and I had to take them to a man in a hotel. And I thought this was kind of a strange order, like some guy's just ordering 5 cookies for himself. So I ended up picking up the cookies, driving to his hotel. And then I get to the hotel and I noticed like all of this like New York Giants gear all over the place. And this was in training camp. This is not this past season, the year before. And I realized I was delivering to the New York Giants team hotel for their training camp outside the Meadowlands in New Jersey. And this humongous 6'7" man comes down the elevator and actually meets me in the lobby. And I give him the cookies. It was New York Giants John Jenkins, who's not on the team anymore, defensive tackle, 6'7", 334 pounds. I'm like, oh my God, this man is massive. So drop him off the cookies. I didn't know who it was at the time, but I obviously it was a guy in Giants gear that was that big. I'm like, I think
right when you see someone that big, you just know
in the team gear.
Yeah.
So I'm like at the team hotel. This is a New York Giant. So I look it up and I realize who it is. And on the Uber Eats app, it says like John J. So it was easier to figure out. And I figured out it was John Jenkins of the New York Giants. And just as I'm about to leave the hotel, all of a sudden he comes storming back to me and running at me. And he goes, "You gave me the wrong cookies." I was like, John, the app says it was 5 cookies. It doesn't specify the type. And he was so disappointed. One, doesn't tip me, pissed off. So I couldn't leave it like this. So I contacted the New York Giants, and they gave me team access onto the field for the following practice. So I went onto the field, interviewed John Jenkins after practice.
With the right cookies or no?
Brought him the proper cookies.
There you go. Right, you got to bring the cookies.
And then I found out he was so upset it's because the cookies were for his kids, and he was pissed not because he got the wrong cookies, but because he knew his kids were going to freak the fuck out, and that bothered him.
Right. Understandable. I'm telling you, man, your son is a couple weeks old. Wait until they get to be like 4. It's like they're like little time bombs. Like the littlest thing can set them off. It can go really bad very easily.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So that was my John Jenkins story. But yes, no dead bodies yet. So thank you, Gerald, for sharing your story from the road. Okay, maybe I'm a bad person here and you can tell me this. I was doing an Uber Eats order and I was in North Arlington and I picked up from this Korean fried chicken place that I want to try. It looks great. That has nothing to do with the story, but I just wanted to mention that. And as I'm leaving the restaurant, there is a couple and their car won't start. And they're looking for help and they're eyeing anybody that can help them. And I see them lock eyes with me like, "Hey, can you help me with the jumper cables?" Totally ignored them, got back in my car and zipped on out to get my next order and continued along or take the food to the next spot I had to go. Am I a bad person because as an Uber Eats driver, not paying attention to the people that had their car stalled and needed help?
That's a tough call. I mean, how guilty did you feel when you first left the parking lot?
I felt terrible. I mean, I totally
but on the other hand, I mean, who knows how long that process is going to take? If it's hot food, you got to get out there. It's almost like you are a superhero where it's like you're Superman. Like you have to deliver this food. You should tell them, "Listen, I got to deliver this food. It's right, it's a mile or 2 away. I'll be back in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Natalia needed her Korean fried chicken. Who am I to then stop from Natalia from having a great meal going to these people's car and helping them? It was just an awkward moment for me because I don't it's funny, like now I'm saying this story, all these stories are like Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's what basically being an Uber Eats driver is when you deal with bullshit. I couldn't bring myself to just stop. And let me be truthful. I wanted no part of this. Like, I wanted no part of this at all. So, having the chicken was a good excuse.
Maybe what if you were saying, listen, I got to deliver this food. It's probably going to be, if you guys match this tip. Right,
exactly.
Like right. So I don't know. How was the packaging of the food? Would the food have held up for 8 to 10 more minutes or no?
Based on my expert experience in doing over 1,300 deliveries, that food would have been cold. I mean, it would have been shot. It would have been shot. So, I mean, you're right, though. I should have asked the people, like, hey, I'm happy to help you with your car, but it's going to cost you $3.
Exactly. Or you need some type of device. Here we go. This would be an invention. Plugs into the, I mean, you can't even say cigarette lighter anymore, because I don't think, those things aren't cigarette lighters anymore, but, where it's like a little device or so, if they just, it plugs into the little thing in your center console, and then it just can keep the food hot. Like a little warming, like a warming drawer, something like that.
Beautiful. Well,
yeah, there we go.
Come up with this together. We can make a lot of money, and then I don't have to be doing Uber Eats anymore. I could just be an Uber Eats consultant that shows up on ways to heat up different food. This is a brilliant idea. I got a little portable oven.
It's not a microwave. Yeah, it's a little small. Like my mother has a warming drawer in her house. I think it's like, just keeps the food a little, warm. So when she cooks it, keeps it right in there. So whenever you get to the house, it's it doesn't get cold. That's what you need. Plugs into the 12-volt spot in the on the dashboard. And there you go. That settles the problem. Then you can jump as many car batteries as you want and do whatever you need to do.
Picked up a food order and dropped it off to a business. This happens all the time where I'll take food and drop it off to somebody else working. And I dropped it off to a woman that was a hairstylist. So I gave her the food, just simple drop off, nothing interesting. She took it and that was the end of it. Here's the part that really pisses me off. She did not tip me. And I find it surprising that she would not tip me, considering she is in a business where tips are so valuable and important. Like, how is somebody that's working on somebody's hair not going to be somebody that then would tip me, knowing that this person wants to have a tip themselves? I found that extremely rude.
Right. I started, they always say, like, usually they say the worst tippers are like the wealthiest people. And like, you think like whereas this, I agree. Like, that's shocking that someone who works in a service industry who relies on tips would not acknowledge that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. It's like, to me, if I'm a hairstylist, I instantly think this is bad karma. I'm not tipping the Uber Eats driver. Little does she know, I'm going to rip her to shreds here on this podcast. I just, the mindset to some people is like, I'm not going to tip, but then I expect a tip from you. Like, you can't have that mindset then, right?
You need to find out where she works, go to schedule a haircut, and then not tip her.
See, that's full circle. I'm going to go to a woman's hair salon and ask for a haircut, and then at the very end, I love that.
Yeah, but they can do a men's haircut.
Tremendous idea. Dolan J. Trump, thanks for coming on the Mike Delivers podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Dolan J. Trump, for coming on the Mike Delivers podcast. Still weird saying that's your guest. The whole thing is bizarre, but I highly recommend following this dude on Twitter. He's very funny. Dolan _ J _ Trump, poking fun at James Dolan and Donald Trump and combining the two, which out loud's like, that's impossible. He pulls it off. All right, a big conversation from this past stories from the road you just heard, the peeing gimmick. I'll say this, I have been able to pee on the road a little bit more. Restaurants are opening up, and I'm starting to now learn the places where you can pee and where you don't have a chance to pee. I don't know, and I didn't deliver during the heart of the pandemic because I had COVID myself, and I was just taking a break from it a little bit. I don't know how anybody could go 8 hours not go to the bathroom. I don't know what to, like, I don't know how you would do it. You'd have to find somewhere on the side of the road and just pee. I mean, there comes a point where it's just impossible, and you're putting your body through torture. I mean, I don't know. I'd love to hear from other delivery drivers what you did. Feel free to reach out to me. DM me on Twitter, Instagram, Mike Delivers Pod. Also, email me, MikeDeliversPod@gmail.com. I'd love to know what your gimmick was to get through that, because it's fucking ridiculous. I mean, it really is ridiculous. As far as smelly foods this week are concerned, nothing really struck my fancy. I will say this week, all the food smelled really good. Nothing nasty. You know, maybe it's because I didn't get to go to that one diner that it seems to have the most disgusting Alfredo-y cheesy pastas. This week, it was all good. So no smelly foods from the road this week. Episode 112 drops on Thursday. My wife and I review the wings from the Buffalo Wild Wings in Secaucus, New Jersey. That's where I am right now, getting these wings. So that episode will drop on Thursday, and we'll talk about the wings as Wing Month continues. Wanted to do Hooters. I'll go more into that, and you'll hear the episode on Thursday, but why Hooters has not been executed as an option for our Mike Delivers podcast food reviews. But again, that will come out on Thursday. Big shout out to everybody that joined this podcast, and by everybody, I mean Dolan_J_Trump. Try saying that 10 times fast. It's fucking impossible, but I got it done. Thank you to the O'Brien Creative Group. Hey, don't forget to check out my Patreon page, Mike Delivers. Go to patreon.com, Mike Delivers, $4 a month. You can get more bonus content of the Mike Delivers podcast. The music you hear, that's the beautiful noise. They are the soundtrack to the Mike Delivers podcast. Thank you to them. This podcast would not be the same without them. This has been episode 111. We'll see you next time for more wing fun in episode 112.